So through this presentation, there'll be little interactive moments where I'm going to ask you to keep a scoreboard of how many resilient traits that I'm displaying you have. So you'll need something to keep track of that. So this is a good time to get a pen or some paper or get it set up in a doc somewhere, just so you can scribble some notes down. It is not mandatory, but I think it will be quite interesting. And I have also kept a scoreboard of where I am on these resilience traits as well. So we'll get into that as we go. Does everybody here have something to write with if they choose they want to? And I'm looking at the chat. The chat is my only way of seeing how you are. Yes, fabulous. Great stuff. So, confidence building and resilience training. So who am I to talk about this anyway? It's really nice to meet you. I am Lizzie. My games career started in 1997. I have worked since then in web, community, marketing, publishing, and my current role at Dovetail Games is VP of Commercial Operations, so covering quite a lot of those sections. It's really important to me that, you know, my whole career has been games, and so I love that I'm able to do this talk. I've worked on PC games, PlayStation, Xbox, mobile. I've pretty much worked on every genre imaginable. I think the only one I haven't worked on, which I'll get around to one day, is roguelites, and that's because they're quite new. So I'll have to add that to the repertoire at some point in the future. And games are my home. Games are all I've ever wanted to do since I was 11. I had a ZX Spectrum and I couldn't draw and I couldn't code. But I knew that once I secured a place in this industry, there was literally no way I was leaving unless I'm removed by security. So it's all I know how to do. It's all I've done for the last 20 something years. And I love it. So the only other thing that I need to mention is that I do have a deaf white cat who's sleeping here and may interrupt us, but I'm very hopeful that that won't be the case. But if he does, apologies in advance. And I'm very hopeful as well that this presentation is not too long or too short, but just right. But let's see how we get on. So what is resilience anyway? Oh, I'm getting overexcited. There we go. There are tens of thousands of papers and documents and infographics on resilience, and just Googling it will give you a major headache to work out what makes it up. So for this talk, I've taken my key 6 pillars, which I'll then go into in some detail. So what are my 6 pillars? Confidence, incredibly important. It's not just something that you have across every discipline of your life. You can be socially confident but hate public speaking. You can be work confident but an introvert. You can be confident in one thing but not in another 20. So we'll go through confidence. Pragmatism. To me, being pragmatic is how I can work well. It's part of my day-to-day. It's crucial for problem solving, and it's strongly housed in how realistic and straightforward I can make complex and sudden situations. So my resilience level is definitely related to pragmatism and pragmatism traits. Composure has a lot to do with composure. That also isn't just personality orientated. And as we go through those traits, it will be really interesting to see what mixtures you have yourself, as well as the info I'm going to share on what mixtures I have. Tenacity, so determination and drive and wanting to be more is one of my key pillars. Optimism. Optimism makes a radical difference to your approach and absolutely everything. It might not be a natural trait. It can be critical to how every other trait starts to go. And acceptance, which I think is the hardest type of trait listed here. Acceptance is a really large resilience indicator. And like optimism, it can be tracked and analysed, and you can keep your own eye on where your level of acceptance is. So that's what I think makes up resilience and what I'm going to talk about today. But what isn't resilience? It isn't an on-off switch. You might have traits that make you more naturally resilient, but that doesn't mean your resilience sits at 100% and that's it. It's not constant. Resilience ebbs and flows like a tide, It can decline really slowly over time. It can have a really big drop because something major happens. It can be persuaded to grow. It can rise naturally. It is not constant. And it's not easy. So work life, personal life, they're all connected to personal resilience levels. And as Mr. Pratchett wisely noted, people aren't just people. They're people surrounded by circumstances. And how we respond to those circumstances is where resilience lives. So this is my interactive klaxon slide. As we go through the next slides, there'll be some traits that I talk about that you find easier and some that you find really hard. Some that you naturally swerve to, like that isn't a problem for me, and some that you think you have to concentrate on them or they don't come naturally to you. So I want you to count the traits that you find easy as we go. And I've put a little interactive klaxon reminder to myself so that we can take a moment while you do that. Also, make a note of what traits are your biggest weaknesses. What are really the ones that you struggle with? And maybe we can get into a bit more of a discussion on that later on. So there we go, interactive klaxon reminder. So let's go straight into the first one and look at areas of confidence that are also really good indicators that your resilience is high and in shape or not. So these are the ones I've listed. Confidence in what you do. Do you know your role and position in the world so you don't feel out of your depth? Confidence in what you know or don't know. It's okay. You know when it's okay to say, I don't know that, let me find out. And you know when to step in because actually you're the expert. Confidence to learn. It takes confidence to step out of what you know and learn something new without assuming you might fail, without thinking that's too hard. Confidence to put one foot in front of the other. You can just keep going. You know how to master large, scary things. You just need to put one foot in front of the other and keep going. Do you have confidence to ask the stupid questions with no fear that you'll be judged? You don't know the answers. You want to know the answers, so you can speak up no matter what room you're in. Do you have the confidence to ask the stupid questions? Do you have confidence to be seen and in control? So if this is a weaker area for you, you might want to hide from meetings, from speaking up, from taking things on. You might be happy to be there, but in the background. Do you have the confidence to be seen and be in control of the areas you need to be? And do you have confidence? This is a bit of a personal phrase, but do you have the confidence to get up off the mat? So today was tough, but tomorrow is another day. Let's go get that one. So how many of these traits do you feel you have? And what comes easiest to you? And which ones of those traits do you think are a little bit more difficult, or you tend to like that one's a struggle? And so that will give you a score on this slide out of 7. So make a note of any that you have to work on or don't feel good to you. So make a note of those in detail. But I'm looking for a score out of 7 on this one. And I don't need to know that score now. We can pick that up later on. Does that make sense to everyone? I'm looking at the chat again. Are we all good with the plan? Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, so that's confidence. See, that was I put it there so that I would remember. So that's a little interactive moment. Pragmatism. So here's my approach to pragmatism with resilience. So we start with change happens. So change happens, and that doesn't have to be immense. That can be that thing that I thought was done has just come back with amends. Or that plan I just locked is now completely unlocked. It's all blown wide open again. Or that's something I didn't think of. Or it can be, on a personal level, it can be massive. It can be, I have to move house. There are lots of different ways that change can happen. So that happens. And then you have to be flexible against your goal. So it's really important, I think, that resilient people are able to know that the change has happened and be okay with it. And then look at, how am I going to move this forwards? We've got to make changes, okay, but what is my goal still? And can you negotiate those changes against what's right for your goal and not lose sight of it because this change is just overwhelming? So can you be flexible against the thing you wanted? And can you enjoy the challenge? This is really tricky. Problem solving might adrenalize you. or it might make you feel like the whole thing is impossible. Do you enjoy the challenge of the change? Can you enjoy it? So then we move into use what you have. So focusing what you've got to deal, what have you got so you can deal with this change is pretty key to making it happen. So it can be easy at this point to go into a phase where you wish you had something else to work with, or you wish it hadn't happened, or it could be different if only there were these other things in play, but they're not. So these are your cards. Use what you have. Are you good at playing them for that situation? And then can you make it happen? So can you get things over the line? And we had a phrase in my publishing team that if nothing left the building today, nothing happened. Because it's all talk otherwise. There is an entire set of players out there, and they want to know what we're doing. They don't, if we have a week where nothing leaves the building, as far as they're concerned, nothing happened. And it was a good way of us just constantly driving to make something happen. It can be, are you the person that can get something over the line? The doing is the thing. So reaching a conclusion decisively and doing it. Can you make it happen? And then can you lead the charge? So do you drive your part of this and stand up and be counted for it? Or are you sometimes a lot happier to be in the wake of the change? So you're part of that change and part of what's going to happen, but you're quite happy to just ride the wave of it. Or do you lead the charge? Or is that something that you find easy or slightly more difficult? So another little interactive moment here. Have a think about, of the 6, how many do you feel you naturally veer to, and how many are more difficult areas that you'd have to concentrate on? Does everybody have a score? I'm going to assume so and move on to the next slide. So now we're talking about composure, and this is a big one. So I find that the traits in composure get dented and pushed around when your other areas aren't feeling so good. So the first one of these for me is emotional awareness. So emotional awareness is whether you know how you are, you know how you're behaving. So from a work and a personal perspective, you can tell when your emotional state is taking you somewhere else and dragging you there. And you've got a pretty good handle of what the impact of that is on anyone else. Or do you only realize it once it's done and perhaps it's been pointed out to you that you were, either like ridiculously enthusiastic about something, or you weren't quite aware of your emotional impact or your emotional state. And that can be extremely hard because you're trying to calibrate it as you're in the moment. So secondly from that then becomes, are you calm and in control? Resilient people are able to recalibrate and keep focused. An example of this is obviously you want a leader to be capable, responsible, and calm in a crisis and not panicking and throwing things around. So how do you feel about that? Are you calm and in control? And then are you prepared? Homework and preparation is part of being a controlled and composed person, and nothing can faze you. You've thought about it. This doesn't mean, though, that you've done 400 hours of edge case work just in case it comes up, but you've identified the likeliest areas and you're ready. And then owning it. So you're in control of that. You're approachable, you're accountable, you're composed. And finally, you're ready. So you're energized, you're not obviously distracted. It doesn't look like you're trying to do 10 things at once. You're visually and emotionally ready for whatever that conversation or that project or wherever something is at. So your resilience max score here is 5. And I'll give you just another 10 seconds or so to have a think about what that number is. Okay. So here's another slide on this because I don't have any of this. Composure is easily my weakest area of these traits. I just don't have it. I don't have it naturally. I have to prepare who I want to be in the room. I have to prepare to the extent of, I think really hard about what I'm going to wear, what I'm going to do for the 10 minutes beforehand. Who do I want to be in that room? Who do I want to come across as in that room? And I have to recalibrate and really focus to try and ensure that I can stay in it. Because I can go in knowing that I want to be all of these things, but I get really adrenalized and distracted by ideas and discussion, and can distract myself. And before you know it, the person who I wanted to be composed, and actually I got really over passionate or super enthusiastic about something, or also my big trait, I've got the worst poker face in history. So while people are talking and I'm thinking, my face is doing this. And I have to work really hard to keep that within reasonable levels of my own personality, but not let it get well out of hand. So, I suck at this section. I'm really aware of it. And I relate to Leslie Knope here in the picture in a major way. And I don't disagree with her, because this isn't about being composed, isn't about being someone else. It's about being a more composed version of you. And that can be really difficult. Now, I'm sure everyone has got a section that they look at and go, oh man, that is so difficult for me. I can't handle that. I get distracted or I struggle with it. But knowing which bit you want to focus on can really help. And that means that your resilience doesn't get tanked at the same time. Lisa, you're posting in the chat, and absolutely, I get hugely distracted by what could go wrong, what might go wrong, why you're not understanding it the way I've prepared it, and how I'm going to pull myself back into where I'm supposed to be. So I think this is a big one for me on composure. So I was very keen to be able to share that. It's really easy to think that everybody else has got all of these. They really don't. Nobody has a full stack of all of these traits, and they will rise and fall all the time. So having a good understanding of where you are really helps. So that was composure. Knowing it helps. So tenacity is an important one for me. So, by the way, I spent ages trying to find this image of memory metal, which I don't actually think is playing for some reason. Hang on, there we go. So memory metal bounces back to its state when you, for example, like this, put it in some hot water. And tenacity for me is all about how you are memory metal. How do you bounce back? How do you return to form after a knock or a setback? So resilience levels obviously have a major part in this. If your resilience levels are low in any area, your tenacity will just dwindle. So do you take charge of a setback? Not instant, can you grab it with both hands? Or do you get kicked around by it for a while until you could wrangle it into something? The next one in this is about bouncing back. Can you bounce back from a setback or upset? And not instantly, but reasonably. If something major has happened, it is totally okay and really important that you deal with it and then you work out how you're going to come back from it, as opposed to, you don't have to pretend it's not happening. It's important that you recognize it and let it settle, and then you're able to come back from it. So how do you get back to where you should be? Or does it kind of linger around, sort of living free in your head for weeks and months after it happened? It's important to understand which one of those is more likely for you so you can call it out. And do you own your situation? Again, that's a little bit like accepting the setback and being able to judge it accurately and not let it live free in your head, just creeping back in, dragging down your resilience for the next few months or weeks. And do you want more? So does a setback make you want more when you've recovered? So yeah, that was bad. Yeah, that was really difficult. But you know what? I'm back and I'm back stronger. So that was rough, but now I want it more than ever. So we're going to go again. And in going again, we're going to make it happen. So we've learned our route through that setback, but we really want to make it happen. Knockdowns are really frequent, and how much resilience you've got and your ability to make something happen can also be a really quick win for pulling that resilience back up again in all of these traits. So you have a max resilience trait score here of 5. And I will be really interested to know how people feel about the tenacity section. So hopefully you've made a little moment. Because we're moving straight on into optimism. So I naturally veer to optimism unless I am exhausted. And then there is a noticeable self-awareness thing for me. But not only me, it's pretty obvious to family, co-workers, friends that, you know, if my optimism comes down because I'm quite naturally optimistic, that is a flag. And I look to people who love me to tell me that what's going on. So having those people in your life is really important. Having a support group who can know you enough to say, you okay? What's going on in there? Is also really, really helpful. But optimism is spectacularly important. And what I know above anything else in this deck is the first point I've got in optimism, which is attitude is contagious. We've all likely worked somewhere or been in a group where someone's attitude just can drift across that room and strike you down. It's like it becomes your attitude in no time flat. If someone is being very pessimistic or cynical or difficult or even wildly enthusiastic, then it can really affect you. You can get dragged over there if you're a particular type of person. And I suffer from this quite a lot. So if your resilience is a bit low and you're really susceptible to mood, then not being swerved by someone else's attitude is really important. The other thing that's important is to make sure that you're not the one causing the contagion. And that requires a bit of self-reflection without kicking yourself, and just requires a little bit of thought over it. If you suddenly realize that you're feeling a particular way, why were you feeling a particular way? But attitude is contagious, and it can really impact yourself. So always learning is very optimistic. Optimism should keep you curious and up for learning from mistakes or learning from new things you don't know. When you don't have very much optimism, it's a flag when you don't want to take anything else on. That is a moment for me that says, why don't I want to do that? And optimism pushes away fear and opens up the confidence section traits we've been through already. So those kind of fears are fear of saying something wrong, fear of doing something wrong, fear of making a mistake, fear of where something is going because it's big and scary, fear of how just overwhelming a whole range of things feel simultaneously. Optimism can banish all of that. But it's not a switch. You can't just turn on optimism, but pay attention to how am I feeling? How am I feeling about any of these things? Because if I'm not optimistic about it, then that requires a little bit more thought. And I ought to focus in on it a bit. So power of belief, I think, lives in optimism. And it's about holding something true and working with it and believing in it. So for me, that's getting up every day, knowing and believing. The power of belief for me is that games are worth so much. I love them. I've always loved them. And the power of belief in what our medium is has kept me shiny and has kept me in this industry for the last 24 years. And I believe in it. And that means that every inconsequential or slightly difficult or tricky thing that's ever come up, it's a moment in the greater power of belief. I believe in working in games. So what are we going to do about this thing? And what's next? So in the words of West Wing, really, what's next? Let's go. There's new things to achieve and get done and motor on. And motivational enthusiasm and optimism go well together and really are a driving force. So those are my thoughts on optimism as part of a resilience set. So how many of those are you aware of personally, and do you have those traits of without you having to really think about it? What's your score? As a side note, this quote from Henry Rollins is absolutely, might as well have said my name under it. My optimism wears heavy boots and is loud. And I think that's exactly what optimism can be. So this is the final of the big sections for traits, and that's acceptance. Now, I'm really well aware that acceptance is not something you can just turn on in the HUD. Self-awareness of your levels of acceptance can be, though. You can be aware of them. So do you know what you control? Are you aware of what's in your wheelhouse, and are you accepting of it? Are the bits of it that are what you control, but you don't like to go too near it, and you're kind of hopeful that that's all right? Or do you, more importantly as well, accept what you don't control? I think you've got to, once you know both of those sections, your level of acceptance on it becomes quite straightforward. These are the bits that I focus on. These are the bits that are that I am responsible for. And it really helps reprioritize and refocus, especially if something is, and it looks, it's like an enormous resilience, like setback. Do you delegate? So not as obvious as part of an acceptance trait, but delegating is accepting that others are going to do a great job. Or at the very least, give you a clear reminder that you are not other people's abilities. This was something that I struggled with for a long time personally. And it's quite life-changing to realize it and accept it. So you can be told a lot of things about, like now, about resilience, but until you accept any of those things for yourself, it's just a thing you read or a thing you heard. So I think that I put delegation in here because I felt it was something that made a big difference to me in accepting what I do and don't control. Change is an opportunity. So I've seen this, change is an opportunity I've seen written 10,000 times in the last 20 years. But accepting change, as we kind of went through in pragmatism, if you can't accept what the change means, it's going to be really tough. And at points where you find yourself incredibly low and feeling like you can't bounce back from something, it's always worth having a think about whether you've truly accepted what the change is and accepted it as an opportunity. Can be really difficult. Yes, Lauren, I am also hugely control orientated from, especially on big projects where you're trying to see all of it at once. Actually, delegation, accept it. Things will change within it, accept it. It can be really difficult because when your resilience is absolutely tanked, feedback is healthy, but it won't feel like it. I work hard now to accept feedback and consider it really carefully. Sometimes feedback is really powerful and relevant to you. Sometimes feedback you get can make you doubt yourself because the feedback won't mesh with what you thought you were doing. And so it's really worth just being able to identify whether that feedback is relevant to you or not, but accepting it and making that decision is yours. So these are quite commonplace, but I have learned to recheck what I'm hearing in feedback, and also ask for it. It can be really easy to think that things are tricky or difficult in a work environment, or you'll be assuming things, but actually when you directly ask for the feedback, you get much more clarity on the fact of where things are and they are not. It can really help scrub out of some assumptions that may be incorrect. You have to accept that you want the feedback. You have to ask, and you have to decide whether the feedback is then relevant. But that's about your self-awareness through some of these character traits. And then if only it was as easy as writing it down. So accepting yourself. Anything before today is gone. And, Elizabeth I knew what was up. The past cannot be cured. So accepting yourself and putting one foot in front of the other can make a huge difference. I don't know how many people here think that do accept themselves. And I think that I waver around on it a lot. Catch me on a different day and I might view this whole section very different to if my resilience is actually pretty good. I might think that all of this is fine. So being able to refer back and just have a think is, I think, crucial in the acceptance section. I do wish it was just as easy as writing it down. So your max resilience trait score here is 6. So hopefully, where's my little interactive button? There we are. So hopefully that you've given yourself a marker out of 6. And then we'll come back around to people's scores shortly, because I wanted to share my personal resilience path. So resilience, as we know, because we've just been through all of these slides, is hugely combinational, hugely varied depending on what's going on in your work life, your personal life, your natural affiliation for some areas as opposed to others, and what you are experiencing at the time. So this is my personal resilience path. The career timeline is very broad, but let's start at the beginning. So I got into games and I got into career, and that was amazing. And I knew I was never going to leave no matter what happened. So I then joined a big company, which was fantastic. Really, really good. I loved it. My knowledge gap was huge. And I screwed up. So the first time I really screwed up something, it was a massive hit on my confidence and my ability to kind of own the issue. And that was the first big, there were lots of little ones, but this was a major knockback. I screwed up. And what it took to get me out of it was to get some more achievements kind of under my belt a little. So getting back to being consistent and reliable and asking the questions, because it was not asking the questions that I made a mess of something, being capable and delivering, that's enough. You don't need to suddenly have a massive win, a massive quick win. You just need to get back up off the mat and start pulling this stuff back together again to get your resilience back up. So it was very viable, got me back on track, which then, of course, I promptly threw away by screwing up again. So same principles apply. Get back up off the mat, accept it, learn from it, stay optimistic, focus, be pragmatic. I'm not my mistakes. I'm how I respond to my mistakes. And over time, that worked out quite well. My resilience hit quite a strong high, and I worked up that. I was promoted, and that was something I really worked for, and hooray. But it was a new position, and there were new requirements and new challenges and things that I really didn't know how to do. I had an enthusiasm for doing them, but it didn't go it never goes incredibly smoothly. There were things I needed to set up and learn, and that kind of bled my resilience out over time. And then simultaneously, so that was my promotion. I went on maternity leave. Maternity leave is a really weird time for resilience. So the combination of not being in control, because I was hugely about control, being forced to take time off. And obviously you want to take that time off. You're having a baby. It's very exciting. But from a career perspective, I found myself, you're kind of forced to take a break. And my head went into, once I'm gone, will people realize they didn't even need me? What are the career implications? It's not even about how great the people or the company are by that point. There's just a lot of chatter in your head. You don't know how you're going to be as a mum. You don't know how you're going to be when you get back to work. So you then have this baby and the whole thing turns upside down. And you have a completely different output on life for however long you're on maternity leave. But then I had to come back to work and I had to face all those previous fears. And I had to face the music. My resilience was at an all-time low. But coming back to work and getting back into it and getting myself organized again and realizing that actually all of those fears were completely, part and parcel of being forced to take time off, kind of pulled my resilience back up a bit. So the next bit in my resilience path that I wanted to talk about was my career changed. So I got back to work, still in the industry, but in another company, I found a change that was particularly difficult. I felt hugely out of my depth, even though I really wanted it. And I felt like I had to work twice as hard to be right. And previous easy ways, we're about to be interrupted by Jeff. Hello, Jeff. All right, he's just laid, yes, hello. Previous easy ways of expressing myself, so all the composure traits weren't going great. And I really struggled with it for a while until I worked out how to be a bit more aware while still being me. Show us Jeff, right, hang on. Jeff, say hi. Say hi. There you go. That's Jeff. We may see more of him depending on whether he thinks that the cursor is particularly exciting. So where was I? Yeah, I really struggled with communication, and I was unable to express myself in ways that previously had resulted in really good return. Like I wasn't able to achieve things, it felt like. So that took a bit of a wipeout, and it took putting one foot in front of the other and the optimism traits for me to kind of climb back out of that, because it's a combination and it runs in waves. So it got pretty good. You know, I got back to knowing my stuff. We fixed that up. I felt good. But then I had a really tough personal situation. So not work related at all. I had a really difficult time. And the impact of that on my work, and as a kind of a collection of where is my resilience was through the floor. And that meant that things at work that wouldn't previously have bothered me in the slightest suddenly kicked in twice as hard. Now, you may have experienced this yourself. You may have your own. Obviously, everyone's got their own versions of what this means to them. But I found that quite tough. And it took a while to get back out, get up and running, get focused, achieve. Resilience is an enormous wave, and loads of things can derail it, and loads of things can bring it back again. But I like to try and look for confident, small wins that start building it all back up again. So that's where I got to on being focused and achieving and feel like I was doing a good job, and stopping letting some of these other traits dwindle. And then I'm giving this presentation, so my resilience is nicely in the middle, because while I know what I think, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone in this audience will agree with me, and that can be a bit of trepidation. So, what happens when your resilience is low? For those who aren't as old as me, you may never have seen this image on the right. It came about as part of MMOs, and it was a particular image meme for how the difficulty curve on EVE Online versus every other MMO that was happening. And it's always stuck with me. I've had it around for a really long time, because when resilience is good, it all flows quite nicely. And when resilience is bad, just about anything can make it feel like that top line. So what happens to me when my resilience is low? I feel like I have absolutely no control. Like however tightly I try and grab hold of something, it's all just slipping through my fingers, and I can't kind of get a handle on it. Jeff, you're very popular. Yes. I second guess every detail. So things that I would normally have just hit send on, or had a conversation about, or gone, I don't really understand that, but let me just ask a few follow-up questions. I would second guess myself. Does this make me look? How does this make me look? How do I feel about this? And that just kind of slows everything down, and also you get in your own head. So you get nervous about doing something that previously would have been ordinary. You get concerned, and that might live with you outside of the whatever project or issue it is that you're dealing with. So if it's personal, it might follow you into work. And if it's work, it might follow you into home. So it's really important to just pay attention to that, because that concern is the thing that keeps you awake at 1 a.m. And you overcompensate. So instead of doing the work that's required, you might do double the work that's required. And that will just exhaust you. It's about keeping focus. And it can make you numb. So this one is very much me. I found that who else is like this? I'm interested in this in the chat. If my resilience is low, I feel like I have to put my game face on when I'm working. And then the second that work is off, it's almost like I've got no energy at all now. That's how I know my resilience is completely shot, because I'm just numb. I'm just blank. I won't concentrate on anything. I don't want to do any of my hobbies. I don't want to do anything that I usually love doing. It just becomes this kind of odd numbness. Is that just me, or does anyone else get that? Oh, thank you, Monica. It's nice to not be alone, but I'm quite happy to share all of this in terms of how it makes me feel. And you forget to breathe. We're not running the World Bank, or at least I'm not, which is pretty fortunate for global economy. But you just forget to get a bit of perspective and breathe. and you push in the wrong direction. So things that wouldn't normally be that crucial, you kind of charge at. Things that are relatively mundane and an easy thing to resolve suddenly take on way more meaning. And again, that's about prioritization and focus, which your focus just switches off. And feedback hurts. So it can be really challenging. It can feel personal. And it can take everything you've got to really be able to push that back into a review box where you can actually take that at your own time and really analyze it, as opposed to just feeling like it's just one thing after another after another. So that's what happens, certainly to me, when my resilience is really low. So how do you get it back? Take the time. It's really important to just take a breath, have a minute, walk away, do what gives you a white noise in your head. Is that, pacing around? Is it talking to somebody? Is it going to the gym? What is it? Is it going for a drive? It doesn't matter, but you just need to take some time so that you can see all of these issues that you feel are overwhelming and knocking your resilience way down, and follow them back. When you follow them back, why am I feeling like this? Why is my self-confidence like, why didn't I think I could talk up in that meeting? If you follow the strands back, you can usually find how you need to prioritize those things and how you can communicate them to people. And then it allows you to refocus. So it can feel like there are 10,000 things and they've all gone wrong. And when you analyze each of these traits and think, why don't I want to do that? Why am I having trouble with this? It can allow you to refocus on a particular goal or project. Get those quick wins in, get those easy ones done. If you've got a large thing that's shadowing over you and you can't kind of get at it, you need a different way of looking at it. So forgive yourself for all of that, because resilience is a tide. It's up, it's down, it's all over the place. It can be based on all kinds of things, but it's only when you can recognize that it's what it's made up of for you that you can work out which bits you're going to prop back up again. But forgive yourself for that, because everyone has areas that they just find more difficult than other areas which they find more natural. And know when to reset. So a fantastic piece of advice that was given to me, which I carry on now, is if you can't do something, then you need to take a step back from it and consider whether it can't be done that way. If you can't write a presentation, then there's something you don't know. If you can't work out how you're going to problem solve something, then there is a piece of information you don't have. Oh, hello, Jeff. Thank you. And there is a methodology which says, stop trying to push through the thing that won't go. Jeff runs to his own schedule. Stop trying to push it through and take a step back and look at how you can approach it differently. Sometimes that can make all the difference. And go again. Resilience is, today's resilience is not tomorrow's resilience. All of these traits you can look at and work it towards getting up off the mat. Go again. The image on this slide is an actual desktop wallpaper that I used for 5 years for motivation. I found it really motivational because when everything felt big and everything felt broad and everything felt really busy, and I was ever thinking, oh my God, I don't know how to do all of this stuff. This screensaver would make me just remind myself, just focus, just get back to work, would you? The stuff that needs doing. So, find yourself something that is a good sanity checker and a good thing that you like to remind you to just take a breath. So we're at the point of the interactive klaxon where we're going to have a look at what were some scores. So my score through all of this is 24 out of 34. That I find, okay, that doesn't mean they're going to be perfect every time, but there are 30% of the traits we've been through that I have to manually check myself for, as I find them a weakness if I'm not concentrating. and they can drag me right down. So if I feel low, I can check the traits and work back. What's causing me to not want to do this or to struggle with this? So I would be really, really interested to know what everyone else's score was. Would anyone like to share their score and actually maybe even join me up on the screen and have any thoughts on their score or areas they find easy? Or would anyone just like to put their score in the chat? The total is out of 34, I think, presuming I did the maths right. So Lisa, 20, that's not a million miles away from mine. And knowing the areas is the important bit. I don't expect anyone to, I think if everybody asked themselves this in a month from now, it might look different. And a month ago, it might look different. Thanks, Monica. I'm 18 to 19. Any other scores? Lauren, you're absolutely right. And, you know, the score isn't, if I score really high, then I'm amazing. It's, I score really high, there are still going to be areas that tomorrow are super difficult somehow. That tomorrow, I can't, like, this used to be fine and now it's not. Why is that? And absolutely, I think it is in constant flux in terms of what's going well and what isn't. Changes can really change things you were used to find easy. And now you're going to find bits of them more difficult. But that's both on a personal and a work level, I think. So this is the end of my talk. I'm actually, it came in at about the right sort of level, which is good. But I'd love some Q&A if anyone has any questions or any areas they want to talk about. Does anyone have a section that they suddenly realize they particularly struggle with, a bit like my composure section, which is a disaster zone? Are there any sections that you think are missing? And also, are there any questions generally for me? And we should all pay attention to Eleanor Roosevelt and do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you'll be criticized anyway. The engagement on, so I can see the chat, which is great. Yeah, please feel free to just throw questions into the Q&A or throw, you know, any thoughts that you've got into the Q&A, and we can pick that up in either chat or Q&A. I like to keep Lauren as a moderator really busy. So, Lisa, do you have a go-to person when confidence is low? I do, but it's not always the same person. So what drives my husband completely nuts is the fact that I will tell him how I'm feeling and he will say, well, but you're great. What are you talking about? But actually, you've already solved that problem because of this. And then I will pay him no mind because it will take someone who doesn't know me really well sometimes to tell me that actually it's all good. So I think it's about picking the person. Sometimes 10 people who really love you telling you that the solution you've got to a project is great and you're going to be fine is nowhere near as powerful as somebody who's working with you on that project telling you the same thing. So I think it's about knowing who to talk to, like a range of people to talk to, depending on what it is you need. And Monica, how do you not make it personal when things are going well at work? Oh, things are not going well at work. So, Monica, do you mean personal in terms of how do you not feel like you're personally being attacked when things aren't going great? Yeah, some of that is you've got to build yourself the time. So the composure element for me is to just take that, put it in a box, And then make sure you can give yourself, even if it's just not live fire, you're able to take that away and actually analyze it. Actually just have a think about it, and then really validate whether it's right or not. But it's the composure element that stops you kind of automatically hitting what you feel. That's certainly what I've learned. What I've learned, and sometimes the problem with resilience is it hurts so bad when you haven't got any at the time, and then it takes a while to build it back up again. So you should try very hard to put things in a box that you're going to analyze later. I think getting scientific on something. Why do I feel like this? Actually, it's not about what somebody said. It's actually about the fact that you're feeling like you can't, that you're not achieving something, or that you don't know what you're doing. And if you can resolve that bit, all of a sudden it's not about what somebody said anymore. Should you always get stuck in, or is there a time to walk away? Yeah, there's definitely a time to walk away. I think everybody will find that really personal as to when they think that time is. But I do think it's really important to ask yourself, what is it that is driving this? And sometimes that's not as clear as it might be. I like to run through resilience checks and think, why do I not want to ask this question? I normally am fine at asking the stupid questions. Why don't I want to do that? And the answer to it might be because I'm not as confident. I don't know the people in the room as well. And their opinion really, really matters somehow, more than it used to. There's a new person. Well, in which case, actually, it's about going towards that rather than thinking, maybe this isn't for me. And on projects, know when to call that the direction you're setting in quits, because if you can't get it over the line, take it back to the beginning. Sometimes you have to go further back to find a different way through it than just trying to keep pushing the thing you've got over the line. I think that's two quite broad answers. Hopefully that answered your question, Bev. I feel like resilience walks hand in hand with confidence. Is this right? Yes, I think it does. So trying to draw how all of these different traits I've just been through all map together. Some of them are really similar, but I think paying attention to if my confidence is down, which bit and why? Is it because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing? Okay, so what am I going to go and find out that I don't know now? The route to fixing some of it isn't sometimes thinking, gosh, I hope my confidence is better tomorrow, or like just wishing it. There's usually follow the path back to the source. What is it? Is it that you don't know something, or is it that you don't get it? Or is it that you had a really, you've got a really crap thing going on in your personal life, and actually that's going to pull at it, and just give yourself a break. Find out where it is, and then give yourself a break. Okay. Oh, that's me looking in chat. Right. Where's Q&A? Some advice to encourage and grow resilience in yourself. I suggest starting with the acceptance traits. If you can't accept, like truly just work on accepting where things are, or what you've got, or what you don't have, then you're always going to be kind of draining it away somewhere, because you're going to want it to be better. But if you're not accepting it, then I'm not sure that it will stick. And resilience doesn't just kind of climb back because you're not looking. There is always something that is dragging that resilience down. And, talking here, I think as a woman, being a 40-something woman means I have to regularly keep my sanity in check based on where are my hormones today? How am I actually feeling in myself? What's going on in a wider sense? And sometimes that can come into play too. Probably at absolutely any age, but there are lots of different factors. But I guess my big piece of advice is try and analyze where it's from, rather than I wish I was more confident at public speaking. Hopefully that was an okay answer to your question. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left. I'm not sure that I think we've covered all the questions. So I missed any of them. And if I haven't, and that is all the questions, my email address and my my Twitter are on the slide. Totally happy to meet absolutely anybody and be more involved. And so please do just drop me a mail or a tweet if there's something that you think of later, or there's anything that I could clarify, or just to say hi. That would be nice too. I do occasionally share pictures of Jeff on my Twitter account. So thanks very much, everyone. I think that's me.